Good evening, teacher and partners. Today we're going to talk about plagiarism. What is plagiarism? Many people think of plagiarism as as copying another's work or borrowing someone else's original ideas. But terms like copying and borrowing can disguise the seriousness of the offense. According to the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, to plagiarize means to steal and pass off the ideas or words of another as one's own, to use another's production without crediting the source, to commit literally theft, to present as new an original idea or product derived from an existing source. In other words, plagiarism is an act of fraud. It involves both stealing someone else's work and lying about it afterward. But can words and ideas really be stolen? According to United States law, the answer is yes. The expressions of original ideas is considered intellectual property and is protected by copyright laws, just like original inventions. Almost all forms of expressions fall under copyright protection, as long as they are recorded in some way, such as a book or a computer file. All the next examples are considered plagiarism. Turning in someone else's work as your own, copying words or ideas from someone else without giving credit, failing to put a quotation in quotation marks, giving incorrect information about the source of quotation, changing words but copying the sentence structure of a source without giving credit, copying so many words or ideas from a source that it makes up the majority of your work, where you give credit or not. Most cases of plagiarism can be avoided, however, by citing sources. Simply acknowledging that certain materials have been borrowed and providing your audience with information necessary to find that source is usually enough to prevent plagiarism. But what does happen with image, video, and music? Using an image, video, or piece of music in a work you have produced without receiving proper permission or providing appropriate citation is plagiarism. The following activities are very common in today's society. Despite their popularity, they still count as plagiarism. Copying media, especially images from other websites to paste them into your own papers or websites. Making a video using footage from others' video or using copyrighted music as part of the soundtrack. Performing another person's copyrighted music, for instance, playing a cover of another band. Composing a piece of music that borrows heavily from another composition. Certainly, this may pose situations in which it can be challenging to determine whether or not the copyrights of work are being violated. For instance, a photograph or a scan of a copyrighted image. For example, using a photograph of a book cover to represent that book on one's website. Recording audio or video in which copyrighted music or video is playing in the background. Recreating a visual work in the same medium. For instance, shooting a photograph that uses the same composition and subject matter as someone else's photograph. Recreating a visual work in a different medium. For instance, making a painting that closely resembles another person's photograph. Remixing or altering copyrighted image, video, or audio, but even if done so in an original way. The legality of these intentions and others will depend upon the intent and context wi- within which they are produced. The two safest approach to take in regards to this situation is first, avoid them altogether. Two, confirm the work's user's permission and cite them properly. The last information read was obtained at plagiarism.org.
As my partner mentioned, plagiarism has been gaining a lot of importance in the last few years. We ask ourselves why, and the answer is clear. Technology has been exponentially increasing in the last few years, and that has made us an easy target for plagiarism. It is hard for us to avoid plagiarism in a way that we have an easy access to documents from the website, we have an easy access to music, we have an easy access to any type or any nature of documents in the internet or in the World Wide Web. And that's the reason why plagiarism has becoming important in the last few years. For that, we have devised different ways to avoid plagiarism. For example, and the most important way for us is paraphrasing. we tend to paraphrase because it's the easier method of avoiding plagiarism. Paraphrasing consists, and it's the most fundamental way to avoid plagiarism because we use our own vocabulary to paraphrase. And that way, we don't have to have intricate knowledge, or we don't have to have a specific knowledge about something to avoid plagiarism. For example, when we're about to cite, we have to know the authors, let's say their name, the year they wrote the document, or the page the document is found on. And when we're paraphrasing, we only have to know what they wrote, the actual essence of what they're writing. And that's the reason why when we are paraphrasing, we have the idea of what they wrote, then we just use our own words to explain what they wrote. In that way, paraphrasing is, for me, the most important way of avoiding plagiarism throughout the world, but not the only one, because citing is the most accepted way for documents like thesis and important college articles. Well, as my partner mentioned, there are different nature of documents or different nature of works that you can copy as your own. For example, uh, music. In the last years, in let's say 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, we wouldn't be able to copy music, but now there's music that has been plagiarized. Why? Because of technology, as I mentioned at first. Because we have the programs, and now we have the ability to copy a track that we found on the internet and put it in a song and make that song our own. And then our computer was the tool we used to plagiarize, but at last it was us who decided to plagiarize. And there are no ways that you can cite a soundtrack or somebody else's new made song. And that's the reason why plagiarism has been gaining a lot of protagonism in the last few years. And that's the reason why learning new ways of avoiding plagiarism, or knowing that the consequences of plagiarizing are deplorable, that's the reason why we have to know, and that's the reason why we're filming this video right now. And for that, my partner Marcela Bulnes will continue explaining about citation and about what consequences plagiarism carries it by nature. As I mentioned before, there are different ways of avoiding plagiarism. I talked about paraphrasing, and now I'm going to talk about citing. There are different types of citations, such as MLA, APA. It all depends on the type of document or the university or college where you are writing. Citing is important because it's the most official way of using somebody else's work as your own, with not plagiarizing for it. For example, there are a lot of quotes and articles that we can use to strengthen something as important as our thesis. And that's the reason why we have to know the author of certain of that document that I'm talking about. We have to know the year of said document, and maybe the page where you're retrieving the information of said document. And that's the reason why citing is also the most complicated and intricate way of citing, or of avoiding plagiarism. If we know how to avoid plagiarism, and I already mentioned paraphrasing and citing, then we will have no problem at the time of writing documents as important as a thesis that is something required for our graduation.
So now we know what plagiarism is, and we know some ways to avoid it, like for instance, quotating and how to citate the proper source of the information. So now we're going to talk about the consequences of plagiarism. For us as Zamorano students, I think the worst consequences are two. The first is the disciplinary faults or sanctions that are last year there were 5 faults. That, for instance, if you are in fourth year in the last year, that means that you have to leave the university for at least 1 year of suspension. If you are in third or fourth or second year and you don't have like too much sanctions accumulated, you can resist the prunia, but it's still a big consequence because a lot of people, especially from third year, lost uh, their their internship opportunity because of the faults. The second is the second worst consequence is that many times you have a zero in the class, and that represents if it depends a lot in how much how much points the homework costs, but many times a zero can represent even the chance of losing the class. Nobody wants to lose a class just because you didn't did a good homework. Another thing that is very important but not many people realize is that when you plagiarism, you do not do like a proper investigation. You go for the easy way, and you don't get the learning you were supposed to get, and you just did the homework, but have did have a lack of learning, and it will have a big consequence in the final test because you will not know how to do the things you were supposed to learn in the homework. Um, Another big problem will be like the lack of professionalism on your part because you will not be a person who has credibility. So this is the end of the video. I hope you learned something and that you didn't get bored.